I didn't expect to come home to silence. Not the peaceful kind either. Not the quiet you get when the windows are open and the breeze moves through the house like it's got some place to be. This was a dead, heavy silence, the kind that presses on your chest and makes you feel like you're the one intruding. I stood on the front walk longer than I should have, keys in my hand, staring at the porch like I'd never seen it before. Same white railing, same chipped paint I'd meant to touch up last spring, same wind chime Ethan hung up years ago when he was still trying to be thoughtful about things like that. Only something was off. My suitcase sat at my feet, dusty from the bus ride back. My knees ached, my back was stiff. I was still wearing the same black dress I'd worn at the cemetery that morning, the hem brushing against my calves like it didn't want to let go either. I smelled like funeral flowers and cheap coffee and grief that hadn't settled yet. I reached for the door, and that's when I saw it. A cardboard box, then another, lined up along the front lawn like someone had started a garage sale without telling me. At first, my brain refused to cooperate. I remember thinking, well, that's odd, the same way you think when you see a car parked sideways or shoes hanging from a power line. Your mind looks for the easiest explanation because the truth feels too big to take in all at once. Then I walked closer, the black ones with the scuffed heel. The photo albums, God help me, the photo albums were stacked crooked like nobody cared if they bent. My breath caught so hard it felt like my lungs forgot what their job was. No, I said out loud, though there wasn't anyone there to hear me. No, no, no. I dropped my bag and moved faster than my body wanted to, kneeling in the grass, touching things just to make sure they were real. My things, my life, the pieces of it I'd carried with me for decades, now sitting out in the open like leftovers nobody wanted. There was my wedding china, the chipped teacup I refused to throw away, the Afghan my mother crocheted with her arthritic hands while watching the evening news. I pressed it to my face without thinking, breathing her in like she might still be there if I tried hard enough. That's when the front door opened. Kelsey stepped out like she'd been waiting for her cue. She had her hair done, soft curls, not a strand out of place. She wore a cream-colored sweater that probably cost more than my monthly grocery bill. Her nails were perfect, glossy, pink, not a chip inside. She smiled. "Marjorie," she said, drawing my name out sweet as syrup. "You're back." I stared at her, still kneeling in the grass, my hands shaking so bad I had to ball them into fists. "What is this?" I asked. "Oh," she said lightly, waving her hand like the answer was obvious. "We did a clean-out while you were gone. You know, downsizing, decluttering. All that stuff was just taking up space." Space! I stood up slowly. My knees screamed, but I ignored them. There are moments in life when pain doesn't get a vote. "That's my stuff," I said. Kelsey tilted her head like she was considering a toddler throwing a tantrum. Well, not really useful stuff anymore. Something cold slid down my spine. "You didn't ask me," I said. She sighed. "Marjorie, you were away, and honestly, with everything going on—" "My sister died," I said. The words landed hard between us. Kelsey blinked just once, then her smile slipped right back into place like it had muscle memory. "I know, and I'm so sorry," she said, though her voice didn't change at all. "But life keeps moving, and Ethan and I had to think about what's best for our family." I looked past her, into the house. My house. The living room looked different, brighter, emptier, like someone had stripped it down to make it look good for strangers. The rug was gone. My chair was gone. The lamp I always turned on at dusk was nowhere to be sight. "What did you do with my chair?" I asked. Oh, we got rid of it. It didn't really fit the aesthetic. I laughed. It wasn't because anything was funny. It was because if I didn't laugh, I might scream. You threw my things outside while I was burying my sister. She crossed her arms. Marjorie, let's not be dramatic. Dramatic. I swallowed hard. I could taste blood, or maybe it was just bitterness. Hard to tell. Where am I supposed to sleep? I asked. Kelsey hesitated just for a second, then she stepped aside and gestured toward the hallway. We set something up for you. Come on. I followed her inside, every step feeling wrong, like my feet were walking through somebody else's life. The floors had been polished, the walls repainted. The smell was different, new candles, artificial clean. She led me past the bedrooms, past the room that used to be mine. She opened a door at the back of the house, the utility room. There was a narrow cot pushed against the wall, a folding table, a single bare bulb hanging from the ceiling. No rug, no chair, no place to put my clothes except a plastic bin shoved into the corner. I stood there, staring. You can use this, she said, just for now. With the baby coming, we needed your room. The baby. I turned slowly. Baby? Kelsey smiled, resting her hand on her stomach. 3 months. Surprise. My ears rang. Ethan hadn't told me. Not a word, not a call, not a text, not even a hint. When were you planning on telling me? I asked. She shrugged. We figured you'd find out eventually. I looked at the cot again, the thin mattress, the concrete floor, the window that barely let in any light. You put me in here, I said quietly. Well, she said, her tone sharpening, you don't really need much space. You're not here all the time anyway. I closed my eyes. I thought of my sister's hands, cold in mine that morning. I thought of my mother's voice telling me to stand up straight and never beg. I thought of all the years I worked double shifts, scrubbing floors, saving every penny so my kids wouldn't have to start from nothing. I opened my eyes. You know what? I said, my voice steadier than I felt. You're right. Kelsey's eyebrows lifted, pleased. It's time to clean out what's no longer useful to me. Her smile faltered. I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. What are you doing? She asked. Calling someone, I said. Who? My lawyer. She laughed, sharp and quick. Marjorie, don't be ridiculous. Ethan owns this house. I looked her dead in the eye. That's what you think. I stepped past her and sat down on the cot, my legs finally giving out. My hands shook as I scrolled through my contacts, but my mind was clear for the first time all day. I hadn't survived 68 years by accident. The phone rang. Once. Twice. On the third ring, Franklin answered. Marjorie, he said, his voice warm but cautious. I was just thinking about you. I heard about your sister. I'm real sorry. Franklin, I said, I need to see you. There was a pause. What happened? I looked around the room, the boxes outside, the door that no longer felt like mine. They put my life on the lawn, and I think they made a mistake. Another pause, longer this time. Come in first thing tomorrow. Bring whatever you have. I hung up and set the phone down. Kelsey stood in the doorway, her arms crossed tight now, the friendliness gone. I don't know what you think you're doing, but you need to understand something. Ethan is my husband. This is our home, and you're a guest. A guest in the house I paid for, in the house I raised my children in the house I gave away because I thought love was enough. I looked at her and nodded once. All right, I said, then I'll act like one. She frowned. What does that mean? It means I'll be polite. I'll keep my head down. I won't make waves. She relaxed just a little. But don't get it twisted. I added. "I'm done being invisible." She opened her mouth to respond, but the front door slammed. Ethan's voice echoed from the hallway. "I'm home." My heart jumped against my will. I waited for him to come to the back, to ask if I was okay, to say he was sorry I missed the news, to tell me this was all a misunderstanding. He didn't. I heard laughter instead. Kelsey's laugh, light and sharp, the sound of someone who thought they'd already won. I lay back on the cot, staring at the ceiling, listening to the house breathe without me. And that's when I realized something I wish I'd understood years earlier. They didn't just move my things, they moved me. And once you let people do...
I didn't sleep that night. I lay on that narrow cot, staring up at the ceiling, watching shadows crawl across the cracked paint as cars passed somewhere out on the main road. The mattress was thin enough that I could feel every metal bar beneath it, pressing into my back like a reminder of where I'd landed. Every time I shifted, the cot squeaked, loud enough that I worried it might carry through the house. Not that anyone would come check on me. That much was already clear. The house sounded different at night when you weren't welcome in it. Pipes knocked and hissed like they were arguing with each other. The heater kicked on and off, rattling through the vents. Somewhere down the hall, I could hear the television murmuring. Kelsey's shows, probably. Then laughter, then silence. No footsteps came my way. I folded my hands over my stomach and tried to breathe slow, the way my sister Grace used to tell me to when things got heavy. Grace always said, "Panic feeds on speed. Slow it down," she'd say. "Don't let fear drive the bus." But grief doesn't care about good advice. Grief sits on your chest and dares you to move. I kept seeing the boxes on the lawn every time I closed my eyes, the way my sweaters had been tossed in without folding, the photo albums bent at the corners, the china rattling against itself like it knew it didn't belong out there. I wondered how long they'd planned it, if Kelsey had stood in my bedroom pointing things out like trash, if Ethan had been there, watching, saying nothing. That thought hurt worse than the cot. Around 2 a.m, I gave up on sleep. I swung my legs over the side of the bed and sat there for a while, listening to my own breathing. My knees ached, my chest felt tight, not sharp pain, just pressure like something heavy resting there too long. I whispered a prayer, barely louder than a breath. "Lord, I don't know what I did to deserve this, but I can't carry it alone." I didn't ask for revenge. I didn't ask for justice. Not yet. I just asked for strength to get through the morning. When dawn finally came, it crept in through the little window like it was embarrassed to be there. Pale gray light touched the concrete floor. Dust floated in the air. I stood up slow, stretching my back until it cracked, and stepped outside to wash my face at the utility sink. The water was ice cold. It made me gasp, but it also woke me up. That was when I saw the boxes again. They looked worse in daylight. Cardboard sagging from dew, ink running where labels had gotten wet. I could almost hear my mother's voice in my head. "Don't leave things sitting out like that, Marjorie. Makes it look like nobody cares." "I care," I muttered, bending down. It took me nearly an hour to drag everything under the porch by myself. I worked slow, stopping to catch my breath, my hands shaking from more than just effort. Nobody came out to help. Nobody even cracked a door. Kelsey's car was still in the driveway, Ethan's too. They knew exactly what I was doing. By the time I finished, my back was on fire and my fingers were numb. I sat on the bottom step and pressed my hand to my chest, breathing through it until the tightness eased. That's when the front door opened. Kelsey stepped out holding a mug of coffee, steam curling up toward her face. She looked fresh, rested, like someone who'd slept just fine. "You really shouldn't leave boxes out front," she said, glancing at the porch. "It looks messy." I stared at her, too tired to even laugh this time. "They were messy when you threw them out there." She rolled her eyes. "Marjorie, don't start." "Start what?" I asked, "acknowledging what you did?" She took a sip of coffee, then frowned at me. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." Something in my chest shifted, a hard click like a lock turning. "No," I said quietly. "You already did that." She scoffed and turned back inside, the door shutting with a soft final click. No slam, no drama, just dismissal. That hurt worse than yelling ever could. I went back into the utility room and sat on the cot, staring at my hands. They looked old, veins raised, skin thin. Hands that had scrubbed floors, folded clothes, holed babies, wiped tears. Hands that had signed every check, paid every bill, kept that house standing when Ethan was still learning how to ride a bike. And now those same hands were shaking. I pulled my purse onto my lap and opened it, checking to make sure everything was still there. Wallet, keys, documents. The envelope I always carried with copies of important papers, just in case. A habit I picked up after my husband died. When you lose someone like that, you learn quick that the world doesn't pause for grief. It keeps asking for proof. By 8:30, I was dressed and ready. Same black dress from the funeral, same sensible shoes. I looked at myself in the small mirror by the sink and barely recognized the woman staring back. Her eyes looked hollow, but there was something steady there, too. A set to her jaw I hadn't seen in a while. "I'm not done yet," I told her. The bus ride downtown felt longer than usual. Every bump in the road rattled my bones. I watched familiar streets pass by, places I'd walked 1,000 times without thinking. The bakery on the corner, the hardware store that still smelled like oil and dust. Life going on, same as always, while mine felt like it had been shoved sideways. Franklin Moore's office sat above an insurance agency, second floor, narrow stairs with a handrail polished smooth by decades of palms. He was already waiting when I arrived. "Marjorie," he said, standing up the moment he saw me, "I'm real sorry about your sister." "Thank you," I said, lowering myself into the chair across from his desk. "But that's not why I'm here." He nodded. I figured. I laid everything out for him. The boxes, the utility room, the money I hadn't touched in months, the furniture missing, the way Ethan looked through me like I was an inconvenience instead of his mother. Franklin listened without interrupting. He flipped through the papers I handed him, his brow furrowing deeper with each page. "Did you authorize these withdrawals?" he asked finally. "No," I said. "I trusted him." He sighed. "And the house deed?" I slid it across the desk. He studied it carefully, then leaned back. "Marjorie," he said slowly, "this house is still in your name." I blinked. "What?" "The transfer was never finalized," he said. "Legally, you're the owner." For a second, the room tilted. I grabbed the arm of the chair until it steadied. "So I didn't give it away?" I asked. "You gave permission," he corrected, "not ownership." A weight I hadn't realized I was carrying shifted off my chest. Not all of it, but enough to breathe. "And the money?" I asked. Franklin tapped the statements. "Unauthorized use, plain and simple." I shook my head. "I don't want him arrested." "That's not where this starts," he said gently. "It starts with boundaries." That word again, boundaries. I'd spent so much of my life tearing mine down for other people, I barely recognized them when someone pointed them out. By the time I left his office, we had a plan. Passwords changed, accounts frozen, and inventory started, notices prepared. I felt shaky but focused. The house was loud when I got back. Voices filled the dining room, sharp, unfamiliar, laughter that didn't belong to me. I paused in the hallway, listening. Kelsey's parents. Harold and Elaine Bennett sat at my table, glasses in hand, acting like they'd always been there. Elaine smiled when she saw me, the kind of smile that never quite reaches the eyes. "Marjorie," she said, "we were hoping to talk." I sat down slowly. Funny, I wasn't invited. Harold cleared his throat. "There's been some tension." "That's one way to put it," I said. Elaine leaned forward. "Kelsey is under a lot of stress. You need to be more understanding." I laughed, sharp and bitter. Understanding of what? Being shoved into a storage room? Kelsey crossed her arms. "You're exaggerating." "Am I? Because I slept on a cot last night." Ethan sat there silent, staring at his plate. "Son," I said softly, "did you know about this?" He didn't answer. "Did you know they took my money?" Still nothing. "Did you know they sold your grandmother's furniture?" That got his attention. "What?" Kelsey shot him a look. "It was old." Harold waved a hand. "It was just furniture." Something inside me went cold. "That furniture," I said slowly, "came from my grandmother, and you sold it without asking." Morning came with a pounding in my head and a stiffness in my bones that made getting off that cot feel like climbing out of a grave. I sat there for a long moment, feet flat on the cold concrete floor, letting my body catch up with the fact that the world hadn't ended overnight, even if it felt like mine had. The house was quiet again. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that means people are avoiding you. I took that as a blessing. I washed my face, brushed my hair, and folded my black dress with care before putting it back into my bag. I told myself I wouldn't wear it again for a while. I'd buried my sister. I didn't need to keep burying myself. Before I stepped outside, I glanced once more at the boxes under the porch. The damp cardboard sagged at the corners. If I left them there much longer, everything inside would be ruined. That thought lit a small fire in my chest. Not today, I told myself. Not anymore. I walked out to the bus stop with my purse tucked tight under my arm. The air crisp with that early Midwest fall bite. Leaves skittered across the sidewalk, dry and loud, like they were trying to warn me about something. I climbed onto the bus and sat near the back, watching the neighborhood roll past. I'd spent most of my life riding buses, to work, to the grocery store, to parent-teacher conferences. I never minded it. There's something grounding about sitting still while the world moves around you. Gives you time to think. And that morning, I had a lot to think about. By the time I got downtown, my jaw was set so tight it hurt. I walked straight into the bank without hesitating, nodded at the teller, and asked for a private desk. "I need full statements," I said, "everything from the last year." The young man behind the desk hesitated, then nodded. "Of course, Miss Brooks." While he printed them, I sat there, staring at the wall, my heart thudding harder with every passing second. I already knew something was wrong. I'd felt it in my gut for months. But knowing something in your bones and seeing it in black and white are two different things. He slid the stack of papers toward me. "There you go," he said gently. I thanked him and took them outside, sitting on a bench near the fountain where office workers were already gathering with their coffees and phones. I spread the papers across my lap and started reading. At first, it didn't make sense. $4,000, $5,000, then another $3,000, withdrawals labeled home expenses, furniture, miscellaneous. My hands started shaking. I flipped page after page, adding numbers in my head, my breath growing shallow. Trips, clothes, restaurants I'd never stepped foot in, places Ethan never talked about, purchases that had nothing to do with keeping the lights on. By the time I reached the last page, my chest felt tight, like a band was wrapped around it. $47,000. Gone. I stared at that number until it blurred. That money wasn't extra. It wasn't play money. That was my safety net, my cushion for when my knees finally gave out or my heart decided it was done working overtime. Money I'd earned one aching day at a time. And they'd spent it like it was nothing. A woman walking her dog slowed when she saw my face. "You okay, ma'am?" she asked. I nodded, even though I wasn't. "I will be." I folded the papers carefully and stood up, my legs unsteady but determined. Anger came next. Not wild, screaming anger, but the kind that settles in deep and steady. The kind that sharpens your focus instead of blinding you. I didn't cry. Not then. I rode the bus back home, gripping my purse so tight my fingers went numb. Every mile felt heavier than the last. When I stepped off at my stop, I didn't head straight for the house. I went next door. June Wilcox's kitchen smelled like coffee and warm bread, just like it always had. She was standing at the counter when I knocked, hair pinned up, apron dusted with flour. "Marjorie?" she said, surprise flickering across her face. "Honey, come in." I didn't even make it to the table before the tears came, the kind you can't stop once they start. June didn't say a word. She just pulled out a chair and poured me a mug like she'd been waiting for this moment. "They took it," I whispered. "My money, almost all of it." Her mouth tightened. I knew something wasn't right. That got my attention. "What do you mean?" June sighed and sat across from me, lowering her voice. "I didn't want to say anything while you were gone. Didn't want to worry you." "Say it," I said. "Please." She leaned in, lowering her voice. "Your daughter-in-law, she's been living real large for someone who doesn't work." My stomach dropped. New cars every few weeks, shopping bags from places I can't afford to walk past. And men came last month, took your old furniture. I gripped the mug so hard it burned. "My mother's furniture?" June nodded, loaded it into a truck like it was junk. Something inside me snapped, not loudly, but completely. When I went back into the house, it felt different, smaller, colder, like I'd finally seen it for what it was. Kelsey was in the living room scrolling on her phone. She looked up when I walked in. "You shouldn't be going around telling people lies. I stole from you." Her eyes flashed. "Ethan had access. That money was mine. It was for the family." I laughed, sharp and bitter. Funny how family only counts when you're spending someone else's paycheck. Ethan came in from the kitchen, his face pale. "Mom, let's calm down." "Calm?" I said. "You let her drain my account." He rubbed his face. "I thought it was fine. She said, 'That's your problem,'" I cut in. "You thought." Silence fell heavy between us. "I'm meeting Franklin again tomorrow," I said. "I suggest you prepare yourself." That night I didn't stay in the utility room. I packed a bag. Just the essentials. Clothes, papers, photos I managed to rescue. I left the cot behind. As I stepped out into the cool evening air, I whispered one last prayer. "Lord, I'm walking away before this kills me." They didn't follow me. They didn't call. And as I waited for the bus under the streetlight, clutching my bag, one truth settled deep in my bones. They thought money was power. They were about to learn what happens when a woman who's lost everything decides she's done being afraid.
I spent that night on June Wilcox's couch,
She insisted, wouldn't take no for an answer. Told me flat out I wasn't sleeping another minute in that storage room, not after everything I'd told her. I didn't argue. I was too tired for pride, too worn down to pretend I was fine. June laid a quilt over me, the thick, handmade kind that smells faintly like detergent and home. She left a lamp on in the corner, low and warm, and before she went to bed, she squeezed my hand. "You're not alone," she said. "Not on my watch." That was the first time in days I cried without feeling ashamed of it. I slept hard, deep, the kind of sleep that knocks you out because your body's been running on fumes. When I woke up, the sun was already high, light spilling through the curtains. For a split second, I didn't know where I was. Then it all came rushing back. The boxes, the bank statements, the way Ethan wouldn't meet my eyes. My chest tightened, but not enough to stop me from breathing. Progress, I guess. June was in the kitchen frying eggs when I came in. "Morning," she said, like this was just another Tuesday and not the unraveling of my life. "Morning," I replied. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. "You eat?" she asked. "I'll try." She slid a plate in front of me, no fuss, no questions. That's what real kindness looks like, knowing when not to pry. Halfway through breakfast, my phone buzzed. Ethan. I stared at the screen for a long moment before answering. "Yes?" "Mom?" His voice sounded tight. "Kelsey's parents are coming over tonight. We need to talk. Like, really talk." I almost laughed. Now we needed to talk? "Fine," I said. "Where?" "At the house." "Of course." "We'll have dinner," he added quickly. "Like a family." I closed my eyes. "I'll be there." When I hung up, June raised an eyebrow. "You sure about that?" "No," I said honestly, "but I'm done running." By late afternoon, I was back at the house. I stood on the sidewalk for a second, looking at it like a stranger would. Same brick, same porch, same place that no longer felt like mine. I walked in without knocking. The dining table was set. My good dishes, the ones I only used for holidays, were laid out neat and proper. Candles lit, cloth napkins folded just so. Kelsey stood at the counter in a soft blue dress, smiling like she was hosting a magazine spread. Harold and Elaine Bennett sat at the table, already halfway through their drinks. "Marjorie," Elaine said brightly, "nice of you to join us." Nice of me. I took my seat slowly. Ethan sat across from me, shoulders hunched, hands folded tight in his lap. He looked smaller than I remembered, or maybe I'd just stopped seeing him through a mother's filter. Dinner started polite, too polite. Harold talked about the weather, Elaine complained about traffic, Kelsey laughed at the right moments, touched Ethan's arm like she needed to remind everyone she was in charge. I pushed food around my plate, appetite gone. The candles flickered, shadows dancing across faces that suddenly felt unfamiliar. Finally, Elaine set her fork down. "We're concerned," she said, folding her hands, "about the stress in this household." I looked up. "You mean the stress caused by my belongings being thrown outside?" Kelsey's smile tightened. "We've been over this." "No," I said calmly. "You've talked. I've listened. Tonight, it's my turn." Harold frowned. "Marjorie, no one is saying the stakes weren't made, but dragging lawyers into family matters is extreme." I met his gaze. "So is draining a widow's savings account." The air shifted. Ethan inhaled sharply. "Mom." "Don't," I said, holding up a hand. "Let me finish." Kelsey leaned forward. "That money was used for the house." I reached into my bag and pulled out the bank statements, laying them on the table one by one. "Miami," I tapped a line. "Designer stores, restaurants you can't pronounce. That wasn't house money." Elaine's eyes flicked to the papers. Harold stiffened. "This is private." "It stopped being private when you spent it." Ethan looked down at the statements, his face draining of color. "Kelsey." She stood up so fast her chair scraped loudly against the floor. "You told me it was fine." "I told you it was Mom's," he said weakly, "and you let me believe it was ours," she shot back. The room buzzed with tension. Elaine stood too, her voice sharp. "This is inappropriate. You're humiliating my daughter." I let out a slow breath. "No, your daughter humiliated herself." Harold slammed his palm on the table. "Enough. You're being cruel."
I looked him straight in the eye. Cruel is putting a grieving woman in a storage room. Silence fell heavy. Ethan's head dropped into his hands. I didn't know how to stop it. That's what cowards say, I replied softly. His head snapped up. Hurt flashed across his face, but I didn't take it back. I raised you better than this. I raised you to stand up when something was wrong. Kelsey laughed, sharp and bitter. You're acting like a martyr. I smiled sadly. No, I'm acting like someone who's done being used. Elaine grabbed her purse. We're leaving. Before you go, there's one more thing. They paused. The house, I continued. It's still in my name. Kelsey froze. That's not true. It is, I replied. Ethan never finalized the transfer. Harold turned to Ethan. Is that true? Ethan swallowed. Yes. Elaine's mouth fell open. You told us. I thought it would get done eventually, Ethan said miserably. Kelsey stared at him like she was seeing him for the first time. You lied to me. I didn't mean to. She laughed, a brittle sound. So this whole time we've been living in her house? I nodded. Every brick. Elaine's face flushed. This is outrageous. No, I said. This is reality. Harold grabbed Kelsey's arm. We're done here. They left in a rush of coats and slammed doors, leaving behind half-eaten food and shattered illusions. Kelsey turned on Ethan the moment they were gone. You ruined everything. He looked up at her, eyes glassy. You ruined my relationship with my mother. She scoffed. She's manipulating you. Ethan stood up slowly. No, I let you. I watched them from the table, my heart aching in a way I hadn't expected. This wasn't victory. This was fallout. I'm not staying here tonight, Ethan said. Kelsey laughed again, wild this time. Where will you go? He looked at me. Mom? I shook my head gently. Not with me. He flinched. Please. I love you, but I won't be your safety net anymore. He nodded slowly, like he understood more than he wanted to admit. That night, I walked out of the house again, but this time my steps felt lighter. The masks were off, and everyone had finally seen what I'd been living with. What I didn't know yet was that Kelsey wasn't done fighting. Not by a long shot.
I wish I could say that night ended with clarity, with relief, with some kind of calm settling over me like a soft blanket. It didn't. It ended with my chest feeling tight as a clenched fist, and my hands shaking so badly I had to sit on the curb outside the house just to steady myself. The streetlight flickered overhead, casting shadows that stretched and shrank like they couldn't decide what shape to take. I pressed my palm flat against my chest and breathed slow, counting the way Grace used to tell me. In for 4, hold, out for 6. I made it through the night on June Wilcox's couch again. She didn't ask questions when I came in, pale and quiet. She just handed me a glass of water, set an extra pillow under my head, and told me to rest. But my body had other plans. The pain started just before dawn. Not sharp, not sudden, just a heavy pressure, like someone had parked a truck on my chest and forgotten to move it. My left arm tingled. My jaw ached. I tried to sit up, but the room spun hard enough that I had to grab the edge of the couch. June, I whispered. The word barely made it past my lips. I remember thinking, this is it. This is how it ends. On a borrowed couch, in someone else's house, after fighting everyone but myself. The next thing I knew, there were hands on me. Voices. June's voice, sharp and panicked, calling my name over and over. The smell of coffee and toast replaced by something metallic and sterile. Then nothing. When I woke up, the lights were too bright. Machines beeped beside me in slow, steady rhythms. My chest felt sore, like it had been bruised from the inside. There was a tube in my arm and a tight band around my wrist with my name on it. A nurse noticed my eyes open and smiled gently. Easy there, Marjorie. You gave us a scare. What happened? I croaked. She adjusted my pillow. Minor heart attack. You're lucky your neighbor found you when she did. Lucky. That word felt strange in my mouth. How long? I asked. About 8 hours, she said. We notified your family. My heart sank. All of them? She hesitated just long enough for me to notice. 2 of your children are here. 2, not 3. Hannah came in first, my middle girl. Strong as steel, always had been. Her eyes red, her hair pulled back like she hadn't bothered with appearances at all. She took one look at me and burst into tears, gripping my hand like she might lose me if she let go. Oh, Mom, you don't ever scare me like that again. Andrew followed close behind her, his face pale, jaw tight, fists clenched at his sides. He leaned down and pressed his forehead against mine for a second before straightening up. What happened? He asked, though his voice already carried anger. I swallowed. Stress. Hannah let out a sharp laugh. That's putting it mildly. I told them everything. The boxes, the utility room, the missing money, the sold furniture, the dinner, Kelsey's parents, Ethan's silence. By the time I finished, Hannah was pacing the room like a caged animal. She did what? She put you where? Andrew snapped. She sold Grandma's furniture? Are you kidding me? Hannah added. They were furious, not the loud, dramatic kind, the dangerous, quiet kind that comes from knowing someone crossed a line that can't be uncrossed. Where's Ethan? Andrew asked. I shook my head. He knows I'm here. He didn't come? Hannah said. I didn't answer. That hurt more than the heart attack. The doctor came in not long after, an older man with kind eyes and a no-nonsense voice. He explained what had happened, using words like acute stress and warning sign. If nothing changes, he said plainly, the next one may not be minor. Hannah sat down hard in the chair. Andrew ran a hand through his hair. What does she need? Hannah asked immediately. Rest, medication, and less stress, the doctor replied, then looked straight at me. That last one is optional. I nodded. He paused. What's causing you the most stress right now? I didn't hesitate. My eldest son. The words felt heavy but honest. He nodded slowly. Then, medically speaking, you need space from that situation, for your own survival. For my survival. That night, I lay in the hospital bed listening to the steady beep of the monitor, thinking about all the times I'd ignored my own body, all the times I'd swallowed anger, brushed off pain, told myself I could handle just a little more. Turns out, my heart disagreed. Hannah stayed with me overnight. Andrew had to leave for work the next morning, but he kissed my forehead before he went. I'm not letting this go, he said quietly. I don't care who it is. I was discharged 2 days later with a bag full of pills and a list longer than my grocery receipts. No stress, no heavy lifting, no family drama. I laughed at that one, dark and humorless. Hannah helped me move into a small apartment across town. Nothing fancy, 1 bedroom, clean, quiet, mine. The moment I sat down in the little living room, something inside me loosened for the first time in weeks. My phone buzzed that evening. Ethan. I stared at the screen for a long time before answering. Mom, he said quickly, I heard you were in the hospital. Yes, I replied. I didn't know how serious it was. I closed my eyes. That's the story of us lately, Ethan. Silence. Kelsey's been having a hard time, he said finally. I laughed. Of course she has. Mom, please, he said, we need to talk. No, I said softly, you need to listen. I almost died. He sucked in a breath. I'm sorry. I believe you, but belief doesn't heal damage. He started to say something else, then stopped. I need time, I continued, and boundaries, doctor's orders. Are you cutting me off? He asked. I looked around the apartment, at the sunlight on the wall, at the quiet that didn't hurt. I'm choosing myself, I said. He didn't answer. When the call ended, I set the phone down and pressed my hand to my chest, feeling my heart beat steady and strong. That night, I prayed again, not for peace this time, for courage, because I knew what was coming next would hurt worse than any heart attack, and I wasn't sure Ethan was ready for it, but I was. The apartment smelled like fresh paint and lemon cleaner, the kind of smell that tells you something new is trying to begin. Hannah had scrubbed every surface like she was preparing for a newborn instead of a recovering mother. She meant well. I didn't have the heart to tell her that what I needed most wasn't spotless counters, it was quiet. And for the first time in a long while, I finally had it. The first few days after the hospital blurred together. Pills in the morning, pills at night, blood pressure checks, short walks around the block where I moved slow and steady like the doctor ordered. Hannah stayed with me, sleeping on the couch, checking in on me every hour like she thought I might disappear if she blinked too long. Andrew called 3 times a day without fail. How's your chest? Did you take your meds? You eating right? He tried to sound calm, but I could hear the anger humming underneath every word. Andrew had always been like that, quiet until he wasn't. He didn't yell much. When he got mad, he got precise, and that worried me more than shouting ever could. On the 4th day, Hannah sat down across from me at the little kitchen table, her coffee untouched. "We need to talk about Ethan," she said. I sighed. "I know." "No," she replied firmly. "You need to listen." That was new. Hannah rarely spoke to me like that. She'd always been respectful, careful not to cross into lecturing her mother territory, but something in her face told me she was past politeness. "He hasn't called me back, or Andrew. He knows we're upset, and he's hiding." I stared down at my mug. "He's overwhelmed. That doesn't excuse what he did," she snapped. "Mom, he let his wife put you in a utility room." I flinched at her tone, but she wasn't wrong. Andrew called just then, like he'd been summoned. "I just talked to Franklin Moore," he said the moment I answered. My stomach tightened. "You did what?" "He's your lawyer, Mom. I wanted to understand the situation fully." Hannah shot me a look that said, "See?" Andrew continued, "Do you know what Kelsey's been telling people?" I closed my eyes. "I'm not sure I want to." "She's telling folks you're confused, that you're sick, that you don't remember giving them permission to use the money." My chest burned, not pain like the heart attack, but something close. "She's painting you like an unstable old woman," he added, his voice tight. Hannah slammed her hand on the table. "I knew it." I swallowed. "Ethan knows this?" "That's the thing," Andrew said. "I don't think he does, or if he does, he's letting it happen." Silence filled the room. "Mom," Hannah said gently now, "we can't let this slide." I shook my head. "I don't want a family war." "This isn't a war," Andrew replied. "It's accountability." Later that afternoon, Hannah convinced me to let her drive me to Franklin's office. I didn't want to go. My chest still felt fragile, like one wrong emotion could knock it sideways again. But Franklin had insisted, said there were developments. Ethan was already there when we arrived. He looked awful. Unshaven, eyes sunken, his clothes hung loose like he'd lost weight without meaning to. For a split second, my instinct was to comfort him. Then I remembered the cot. "Mom," he said quietly. I nodded, but didn't move towards him. Franklin gestured for us to sit. "Thank you all for coming. This conversation needs to happen with everyone present." Kelsey wasn't there. "That alone tells you something," Hannah muttered under her breath. Franklin slid a document across the table. "I've received multiple calls regarding Mrs. Brooks' mental fitness." I felt like I'd been slapped. "What?" I whispered. Franklin's jaw tightened. "Someone has been implying that Marjorie is not capable of managing her own finances." Ethan's head snapped up. "Who?" Franklin didn't hesitate. "Your wife." The room went dead silent. "She wouldn't do that," Ethan said weakly. Andrew leaned forward. "She already did." Franklin nodded. "She suggested we appoint a financial guardian, claimed your mother was confused due to grief."
I felt Hannah's hand close around mine. Ethan stood up so fast his chair scraped loudly. "That's a lie." Franklin's voice was calm but firm. "It's documented." Ethan ran a hand through his hair, breathing hard. "She said she was just trying to help." "Help herself," Hannah said coldly. I spoke then, my voice quieter than everyone else's, but steady. "Ethan, I need you to hear this. I will not allow anyone to take my autonomy. Not you, not your wife." He looked at me like I had struck him. Franklin continued, "There's more. The sale of the furniture was traced. Cash transaction, no receipt. That puts you both in legal jeopardy." Ethan sank back into his chair. "I didn't know," he whispered. Andrew stood. "That's your favorite excuse." "Enough," I said softly. Everyone stopped. "I don't want yelling. I want truth." I turned to Ethan. "Did you know she was spending my money?" He hesitated. That hesitation answered everything. "Yes," I said quietly, "you did." He broke. Tears spilled over, messy and uncontrolled. "I didn't know how to stop her. She kept saying it was temporary, that you'd understand." "And you believed her over me," I replied. Hannah stood. "Mom almost died." That landed. Franklin cleared his throat. "Given the circumstances, we'll be proceeding with full financial separation and formal eviction notice." Ethan looked up sharply. "Eviction?" I nodded. "Yes. But the baby is not my responsibility," I said. "I will not sacrifice my health again." Andrew exhaled slowly, like he'd been holding his breath for weeks. When we left the office, Ethan followed me into the hallway. "Mom, please," he said, grabbing my arm gently. "I'm trying to fix this." I removed his hand. Trying comes before damage, not after. He looked at Hannah and Andrew, desperation written all over his face. "You're really going to take her side?" Andrew didn't flinch. "We're taking what's right." That night, back at the apartment, I sat alone on the balcony wrapped in a blanket, the city lights blinking softly in the distance. I thought about the years I spent protecting Ethan from consequences, how every scraped knee, every bad grade, every poor decision had been cushioned by my love. Maybe that was my mistake. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. "Marjorie," a woman's voice said sharply. "You're tearing this family apart. Kelsey is pregnant, Ethan is distraught, and all because you can't let go." I smiled sadly into the night. "No," I said. "This family broke when respect left the room." She scoffed. "You'll regret this." I ended the call. Andrew was right. This wasn't a war. It was a reckoning, and the truth was finally standing where it couldn't be ignored anymore. But Kelsey wasn't finished yet. Not even close.
The eviction notice went out on a Tuesday. Franklin Moore had warned me it wouldn't be quiet. Paper like that never is. It lands heavy, even when it's deserved, especially when it's deserved. I sat at the small kitchen table in my apartment, hands folded, watching Hannah read the copy one last time before sealing the envelope. "You don't have to do this," she said, not for the first time. "Yes, I do," I replied. My voice didn't shake. That surprised me. For weeks now, my life had been measured in doctor's appointments, pill organizers, and slow walks around the block. Healing forces you to slow down, and when you slow down, you start to see things clearly, things you ignored when you were too busy surviving. Ethan had texted the night before. "Mom, please don't do this. I'm begging you." I hadn't replied. Andrew dropped the envelope at the courier himself. He said he didn't trust anyone else with it, said if it was going to be done, it should be done clean. "They'll get 30 days, he told me later, legally airtight." I nodded. 30 days felt both too short and too long. The call came that afternoon. I knew it was Ethan before I even looked at the screen. Some instincts never fade. "Mom," he said, the second I answered. "What is this?" "It's notice," I replied. "You're really going to evict us?" His voice cracked. "With a baby coming?"
I closed my eyes, leaned back in the chair. I didn't force you into this situation. You're my mother, he shot back. You're supposed to protect me. Something in me finally broke. Not loudly, not dramatically, but completely. I protected you your whole life, I said. This is the first time I've protected myself. Silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. Kelsey's freaking out, he said finally. Her parents are threatening lawsuits. She says you're doing this to punish her. I'm doing this to survive. Those are not the same thing. You're choosing money over family, he snapped. I sat up straighter. No, I'm choosing dignity over abuse. He laughed bitterly. Abuse? Mom, that's dramatic. That word again. Ethan, I said quietly, you let your wife erase me from my own home. You let her steal from me. You let her sell my mother's furniture like it was junk. And when I almost died, you didn't come to the hospital. His breathing turned ragged. I was scared, he said. So was I, and I was alone. Another pause. You're really doing this, he said. Yes. He hung up. I didn't cry right away. That came later, when I was alone in the bedroom, sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall where Hannah had hung a small wooden cross. Faith doesn't always show up as comfort. Sometimes it shows up as resolve. Lord, I did my best. 3 days later, Kelsey showed up at my apartment. No warning, no call. I opened the door to find her standing there, in oversized sunglasses, arms crossed tight over her chest. She looked thinner, sharper, like someone running on pure adrenaline. We need to talk, she said. No, I replied, stepping into the doorway so she couldn't push past me. You can't do this, she hissed. You're destroying our lives. I smiled sadly. You did that on your own. She laughed high and brittle. You think you've won? I'm not playing a game, I said. She leaned in close. Ethan will never forgive you. That one landed. I won't pretend it didn't. I know, I said quietly. Her face twisted like she hadn't expected that answer. You'll never see your grandchild. Ever. I took a slow breath. My chest tightened, but I stayed upright. If that's the price of peace, I'll pay it. She stared at me, searching for weakness. She didn't find any. You're cold, she spat. No, I'm done. I closed the door. My hands shook after. I had to sit down, press my palm against my chest, breathe through the familiar ache. But it passed. That evening, Andrew came over with takeout and a look on his face that told me something was coming. They're packing, he said. I nodded. Good. Kelsey's parents are trying to spin it, telling people you're heartless, saying you're sick and confused. I smiled faintly. Let them talk. You sure? He asked. Yes, I said. Truth doesn't need defending. The last time I saw Ethan was a week later. He stood outside my apartment building, hands shoved into his jacket pockets, eyes red-rimmed. He looked like a man standing at the edge of something he didn't understand yet. Can we talk? He asked. I hesitated. The doctor's voice echoed in my head. No stress, no emotional shocks. But he was my son. I nodded. We sat on a bench near the entrance. Cold wind whipped through the trees, rattling dry leaves across the sidewalk. I didn't think it would come to this, he said. I did, just not this late. He looked at me, really looked at me, like he was trying to memorize my face. She says you're doing this out of spite. I shook my head. I'm doing this because my heart can't take another betrayal. He swallowed. If you do this, if we leave, things won't ever be the same. I met his gaze. They already aren't. You're choosing to lose me, he said. No, I'm choosing not to lose myself. Tears slid down his cheeks. He didn't wipe them away. "I don't know how to fix this," he whispered. "You don't. Some things don't get fixed. They get accepted." He stood up abruptly, like staying another second might break him. "I hope you're happy," he said. I looked at the sky, gray and wide above us. "I hope you learn." He walked away without looking back. That night, I didn't sleep much. I lay in bed listening to the city hum, thinking about the boy I raised, the man he'd become, the line between them that I could never cross again. But when morning came, my chest felt steady. The eviction date arrived quietly. No shouting, no drama. A moving truck, boxes loaded, Kelsey barking orders, Ethan silent. I watched from across the street, unnoticed. When the truck pulled away, something inside me settled. Not joy, not relief, acceptance. Hannah squeezed my hand. "You okay?" I nodded. "I will be." Because some choices don't feel good, they feel right. And as the house disappeared down the road, I knew one final truth was waiting to be faced. The ending wasn't about revenge. It was about who I would become after letting go, and that was something only time and one last decision would reveal.
The house sold in early spring. Not the one Ethan and Kelsey moved out of. That one still sat there, empty and quiet, waiting for its next chapter. I sold the small apartment instead, the place that had carried me through the worst weeks of my life. I needed something different now, something that didn't smell like hospitals and heart monitors and hard decisions. I moved 3 towns over, closer to Hannah, far enough that memories didn't ambush me at every stoplight, close enough that I wasn't alone unless I chose to be. The new place was modest, 1 floor, wide windows, a tiny patch of dirt out back that barely qualified as a yard. But the first morning I woke up there, sunlight poured in like it had been invited, and for the first time in a long while, my chest didn't feel tight. Healing is quiet. Nobody tells you that part. It doesn't come with fireworks or applause. It comes in moments so small you almost miss them, like realizing you slept through the night, or that your hands stopped shaking when the phone rings, or that you laughed at something on television without feeling guilty for it. Andrew helped me unpack. He moved slow, careful with my boxes, like every object carried weight beyond its size. Hannah brought plants, too many of them, and crowded them along the windowsills like sentries guarding my peace. "You don't need to be alone anymore," she said gently. "I know, but I still want to be me." She smiled. She understood. The news about Kelsey broke a month later. I didn't hear it from her or from Ethan. I heard it the way most things travel in small Midwest towns, through whispers that get louder every time they're repeated. It started with a post online, then another, then screenshots. Turns out, while she was telling people I was unstable, confused, sick, she was also bragging about spending money that wasn't hers, about managing an older woman's assets, about how easy it was to push someone aside if you acted confident enough. Someone sent everything to Franklin, someone else sent it to Hannah, and then someone leaked it. The fallout was fast and brutal. Kelsey's parents tried to step in, lawyers got involved, but truth has a way of sticking when there's proof. The bank statements, the messages, the lies stacked so high they collapsed under their own weight. Andrew called me that night. I watched the phone ring until it stopped. He texted instead. I didn't know it was this bad. I stared at the words for a long time before replying. "You knew enough." That was the last thing I ever said to him. People asked me if it felt good, seeing her exposed, seeing her reputation crumble,
seeing the story turn in my favor. It didn't. It felt heavy, sad, necessary. Franklin told me later that if I wanted to pursue charges, I could. Everything was documented, every dollar accounted for, every transaction traced. I thought about it for a long time. Then I said no. I don't want revenge, I told him. I want distance. That surprised him. He smiled softly. That may be the strongest choice you could make. Andrew tried one last time. It was a handwritten letter left in my mailbox, like a relic from another life. I recognized his writing instantly. I sat at the kitchen table for a full hour before opening it. He wrote about regret, about guilt, about how everything got out of control, about how Kelsey blamed everyone but herself, about how he felt trapped between loyalty and fear. He wrote that he missed me, that he was sorry, that he hoped someday we could start over. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the envelope. I didn't respond, not because I hated him, because I finally loved myself enough to stop reopening wounds that refuse to heal. Forgiveness doesn't always mean reconciliation. Sometimes it just means you stop bleeding for people who won't stop cutting. The doctor cleared me a few weeks later. My heart had recovered well, blood pressure steady, stress levels manageable. "Whatever you're doing," he said, flipping through my chart, "keep doing it." I smiled. I plan to. I joined a small church down the street. Nothing fancy, no big sermons, just a room full of people who understood quiet faith and hard-earned peace. I volunteered twice a week at the food pantry, folded clothes, sorted cans, talked to folks who didn't need fixing, just listening. It grounded me, reminded me who I was before I became someone's convenience. One Sunday afternoon, Andrew brought his kids over. They ran through the yard like it was a racetrack, laughing loud enough to rattle the windows. "Grandma!" they shouted, barreling into me like tiny hurricanes. I laughed, full and free, my heart keeping pace just fine. Hannah watched from the porch, eyes soft. "You okay?" she asked. I nodded. Better than okay. That night, after everyone left, I sat alone at the kitchen table with a cup of tea and thought about the word family, how we use it like it's unbreakable, like it excuses anything. Family should never cost you your health. It should never ask you to shrink. It should never demand silence in exchange for belonging. I prayed then, not for reconciliation, not for answers, not even for closure. I prayed for gratitude, for the strength I didn't know I had, for the clarity that came too late but still came, for the courage to walk away without bitterness. I don't know what Ethan's future holds. I don't know if Kelsey ever learned anything from what happened. I don't know if my grandchild will ever know my name. What I do know is this: I survived. I chose myself. I stopped mistaking endurance for love. And when I look back at that woman standing on the lawn, staring at her life in boxes, I want to reach through time and tell her something important. You're not being buried, you're being planted, and everything you need to grow, you already have. If you feel comfortable, I'd appreciate it if you left a like on this video. It helps these quiet stories reach the people who might need them most. You can subscribe to the channel if you'd like to hear more stories like this, stories about love, endurance, and the things we carry longer than we should. And if you want to, tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I read them, truly. Knowing this story traveled farther than my living room gives me more comfort than you might imagine. Thank you for sitting with me. Take care of yourself, and take care of the people you love.